computer. Alrighty. The Cine-Geezers are meeting once more from their respective homes in the middle of the first snowstorm of the season.
True enough.
So I'm hoping that all of you have got the essentials. You got to have toilet paper, you got to have bread, you got to have milk, you got to have eggs, but most importantly, you got to have us because we're providing free amusement on a winter's day for you.
Exactly. Exactly.
So I'm Cine-Geezer Mike Dobbs, and the handsome gentleman with the great movie posters behind him is Stephen R. Bissett, Cine-Geezer.
Hello. And Mike and I are here today in Monstoscope, the special process that we've prepared for
What
this
was that
episode.
again? What was the name?
Monstoscope. Monsta scope. Monsta scope.
So maybe when I'm putting this up, I should say that this was filmed in Dinoscope.
No, Monstoscope.
Oh, come on. We got to have our own
All
name.
right. Dinoscope.
Okay.
Dinoscope.
All
Okay.
right. So behind you is Valley of the Dragons.
Valley of the Dragons, Columbia Pictures adaptation of Jules Verne's Off on a Comet.
And then
Also
like,
behind me is Varan, the Unbelievable, which is in and of itself not a terrible movie, but once you cut all the good shit out and put Myron Healy in its place, you have a bad dinosaur movie.
is Myron Healy the hero or the villain?
Well, it depends how you feel about Myron Healy. He's he's the nominal hero in the American version that Crown International released here in America. But for me, as a monster fan, definitely the villain because I want more Varan and less Myron. And
Okay.
we get a lot of Myron just blathering on and on and on.
So is he the equivalent in that film to Raymond Burr in the American Godzilla?
He wishes he was Raymond Burr in the American Godzilla. Yeah, no, it's basically him sitting outside of an army tent, occasionally with another performer sitting with him as he just talks complete nonsense. He's more the equivalent of John Carradine in any Jerry Warren film, where
Ooh.
Jerry Warren would bring in John Carradine, pay him whatever John Carradine got for a day, and Carradine would memorize the dialogue with a single read and then just blather. And Jerry Warren would cut out anything interesting about the Mayan mummy or the Scandinavian alien invasion and replace it with John Carradine shooting his mouth off. That's Myron Healy in Varan the Unbelievable.
I think sometime in the future we should do a bottom of the barrel filmmaker Cine-Geezer talk. Jerry Warren,
Yeah.
Andy Milligan, um, Ed Wood's work makes their work
He's good. Yeah, Ed
look like
Wood's like a pillar of entertainment compared to, I mean, Jerry Warren was once called in the Castle Frankenstein write-ups that Bob Stewart and Joe Dante Jr. wrote regularly for that magazine. Cine abortionist Jerry Warren. So
so. Let's see. You have one more.
I have two others. I've got
Okay.
actually three others. I've got Two Lost Worlds and Unknown Island, which was a later double bill. Unknown Island from 1948, the first color feature film with dinosaurs, and Two Lost Worlds, what my nomination for one of the worst dinosaur movies ever made. Came out in 1950, 51. This is a reissue from later in the 50s. It got reissued again and again in the 50s, even though it's really terrible. And then The Island of the Lost, an Ivan Tors production, never released theatrically in America. It only played on television, and we can talk about that. But I do have the South American one sheet poster for The Island of the Lost, which has as its dinosaur. Let me see if I can lift this up. A alligator. I'm sorry, an alligator with fins glued to its head.
Oh, poor alligator.
The venerable tradition of gluing rubber stuff to monitors and alligators to turn them into dinosaurs.
So, uh, gentle viewers, Steve Bissett is legitimately, through both love and research, an expert on dinosaur-related films. And he suggested that we talk about this. So I'm definitely the straight man here because there's stuff that I know, and then there's stuff that you know, and you know a lot more than me.
Well, why don't we start with being Cine-Geezers, as we often do? What was your first exposure to a dinosaur movie as
That
a as
That
a
is something I
tadpole?
can actually answer.
Okay.
I was a kid living here in Springfield, Massachusetts, and on television, this must have been about 61 or 62, probably 61. I saw the great Ray Harryhausen's Beast from 20,000 Fathoms. And my mother had started indoctrinating me that A, movies are fine, anything scary is bad for me. My mother also adhered to the teachings of Dr. Frederick Wortham that if I
Ooh.
read superhero comic books, I would be bad. And she lumped Mad Magazine into that. I say all of this because when finally I started seriously being interested in film, which was seventh grade, I immediately went to the things that my mother wouldn't let me watch.
Of course you did. That's how it works.
But I thought as a kid that 20,000, The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms was wonderful. I still think it's wonderful. Um, and later on to find out that it had been roughly adapted from a Ray Harryhausen short story that
A Ray
appeared.
Bradbury
Excuse me,
short
I'm
story.
sorry,
Yes. Yeah.
Ray Bradbury. I'm getting my Rays, and of
Well,
course
they were best friends.
they were best
So
friends, so
exactly.
they're going to forgive me. Um, but a Ray Bradbury short story from Saturday Evening Post, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, it actually wasn't adapted from that. It was originally. I also believe my first dinosaur movie was The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms, which I also saw on TV. Now, my memory is I was so young when I saw it that I knew that monster movies weren't real, but I also had heard with relatives talking about going to Coney Island that Coney Island was real. And I was attempting to convince my father to drive us to Coney Island before they killed the Rhedosaurus. My father, of course, had no idea what is my kid blathering about. Um, and and of course, the Rhedosaurus was dead before we even would have made it to the front door of the car. Had my father decided to drive us the what 8 hours to Coney Island that it would have taken to get down there. Um, but yeah, I that was my first exposure to a full dinosaur movie that I watched from beginning to end. It was also my introduction to Lee Van Cleef, although I didn't realize that till much later in life. Um,
Well, I can say honestly that that movie spurred my interest into dinos. Um, one of the first books that I read that wasn't a definite, well, it was a kid's book. It was by Roy Chapman Andrews,
oh yeah,
and it depicted his expedition to Mongolia,
yep,
where he was the guy who discovered fossilized dino eggs.
yeah. It was a nest of Protoceratops,
And
and
then for me, my parents took me out, and I was just, the weird boy, the wee little boy, um, to Nash Dino Land in Granby, Massachusetts. Carlton Nash, his family owned a piece of property in Granby near the Granby South Hadley line. His family owned it since Revolutionary times. Okay,
oh my God,
they had been on this land for a very long time. And Mr. Nash had discovered on his property a whole huge vein of shale. And within that shale were thousands of dinosaur footprints. And he started excavating them. And then he even appeared on To Tell the Truth in the 1960s.
oh really?
He was
Whoa,
selling dinosaur footprints, um, and I mean some huge ones. There's little ones, but then there are some big. He was selling them internationally, and it made him his business. And I was both elated and disappointed because Mr. Nash had fabricated these concrete dinosaur sculptures. They were really rough.
they're pretty grotesque. You drove me down there. Now, of course, they're decayed, so they're
Right.
even more grotesque. But I have an issue of either Popular Science or Popular Mechanics that has a from the 50s that has an article about Nash's Dino Land. And they have photos of the cement dinosaurs when they were relatively new. And yes, they were grotesque. artifices, to be sure.
Well, Mr. Nash also hand painted. I wish these things still existed. And I went to high school with Mr. Nash's son, Cornell. Very nice guy. Unfortunately, he passed away a couple years. I
Uh,
would have asked him, where were your dad's hand painted signs? And he painted these signs to advertise his quarry, and it had people staring up at a big ass real dinosaur. And that was the disappointment part. I really thought in my naive little kid head that I was going to see a dinosaur.
right, right, right.
But nonetheless, I mean, it was, uh,
That's more than we had in Vermont. There are no dinosaur footprints in Vermont. There may have been one along the Connecticut River in Bellows Falls, Vermont, but it was famously called the giant raven foot. It
yeah,
predates the word dinosaur. And the legacy, as it's been passed down, is that when it was discovered by Bellows Falls locals that those muckamucks up at Dartmouth College were curious about the giant raven's foot, locals blew it up. And this began a grand tradition of Bellows Falls, which included actually blowing up the Bellows Falls. um,
was that to improve navigation on the river or to improve water power?
it may have been both, but what it did was it stopped the salmon and the fish from moving upstream. Not salmon, but the trout
Right.
that would come upstream. So they had to later construct fish ladders. Um, but yeah, that's the only Vermont's geology is such that we don't have what Massachusetts has and Connecticut has, which is actual dinosaur footprints fossilized. There's still a set of them right along Route 5 south of Northampton. And before you get into
Yep.
Holyoke,
And
you
Holyoke,
can
yep.
pull in. There's a pull in spot there, and you can walk a short distance from where you park your car. And there's a long strip of fossilized dinosaur footprints that you can see. Some little sauropod was running right along, a bank of mud,
Right.
and those have
So,
ossified.
so you and I had a common experience as little kids. We saw that movie.
Yeah.
I'm sure you read Roy Chapman Andrews.
Oh, well, I was already a dinosaur junkie. I was one of those kids. My mom related many times that, the books that she read to me as a little kid weren't fairy tales. They were dinosaur books. She couldn't pronounce the names. She would stop reading and I would pronounce the names. So I can honestly say I learned to read, because of dinosaurs and clearly learned how to phonetically sound out words, which serves me pretty well to my dotage. There are still things I mispronounce. Um, so I was already a dinosaur junkie. To stumble on a movie that had a living dinosaur in it and that was so beautifully done. Ray Harryhausen's stop motion animation creation, the Rhedosaurus, a completely imaginary, fabricated prehistoric reptile. Man, what a movie to luck into. It was one of the holy trinity for me growing up, because not only was it Harryhausen's work that I fell in love with, it is a perfectly told story. I
Yes.
mean, it is a brilliant piece of filmmaking. The screenplay, the direction by Eugene Laurie, who had been a production designer, art director, making the leap into directing with this film, and he absolutely understood. Okay, I only have this much money. It was made for less than $200,000, and I have to maximize that money to tell this story. And he was a genius at it, including borrowing the fake dinosaur from the Howard Hawks film Bringing Up Baby to set up as a backdrop when we meet the paleontologist played by Cecil Kellaway. That the Bringing Up Baby fake brontosaur skeleton is what's behind him, because Eugene Laurie knew how to work with very little money to create very convincing set pieces, and it's a brilliantly put together film.
So that was a big hit for Warner Brothers.
Huge.
It really did launch Ray Harryhausen's career. Um, and
Harryhausen had worked with Willis O'Brien, his
right.
hero. Willis O'Brien being the stop motion animator of the 1925 The Lost World, which is the first popular dinosaur feature film from 1925. if any of you watching and listening were among the crowd that first saw Jurassic Park opening weekend, that is the closest in our lifetimes that we will ever experience what it must have been like for an audience in 1925 to see The Lost World. People watch The Lost World today, and if you read online write-ups, people find the stop motion animation clunky, and much of it is, but in 1925, nothing like that had ever been seen, particularly in a feature film where it's integrated with live action actors. And it was just a phenomenon. It was a worldwide hit for First National, the studio that later became Warner Brothers or was absorbed by Warner Brothers. And Willis O'Brien was the man who orchestrated the stop motion effects for The Lost World. Then he orchestrated the special effects department for King Kong. So King Kong was the movie that a very young Ray Harryhausen saw as many times as a human being could see a film in 1933 and 36 and 42. Anytime King Kong was in theaters again, Ray Harryhausen was there to see it again. And that led to him experimenting with doing his own stop motion amateur films from his preteen and teenage years. He showed some of his footage to Willis O'Brien, and O'Brien was impressed enough that Harryhausen was hired to work on Mighty Joe Young. O'Brien had worked with Harryhausen and George Pal on some of the Puppetoons, and that was Ray's first professional work in stop motion. Without getting into the weeds too much, Mike, as you know, the Puppetoons weren't done stop motion; they were done with replacement animation, where different heads and different figures were actually carved to represent each stage of movement. But Willis O'Brien worked with stop motion animation, where you build a metal armature, craft a model around that, make it look as much as possible like a living creature. And it was artists like Marcel Delgado who actually built the models. And so Harryhausen got to work on Mighty Joe Young, and he, in fact, became the key animator on Mighty Joe Young. The problem was O'Brien's techniques, which involved glass paintings for backgrounds, combined with miniatures and rear projection, was a very expensive technique. It really required a studio behind it. And Harryhausen had to figure out, how do I do this for no money? And he figured out with The Beast and 20,000 Fathoms how to fabricate what he called a reality sandwich for very little money that involved some miniature sets in the foreground, like a miniature truck or car or part of a building, the middle ground being the animation model, the background being an integration of background miniature flats, photographs usually, and rear projection, so that it would look like the Rhedosaurus was stepping out between two buildings in the background into the middle ground and able to move toward the foreground. And Ray refined this technique in that one film. It's remarkable what he did for just a few $1,000s on Beast and 20,000 Fathoms.
Yeah, let's make sure people understand that despite its success, not only artistically and financially and technically, this was a relatively low budget film.
Oh yeah, Warner
It,
Brothers picked it up for a song.
so, I mean, today, if you judge, if you use Jurassic Park and its many sequels as a yardstick to judge other dino movies, number one, it isn't fair because Jurassic Park had enormous budgets
Yeah,
to accommodate the CGI. Um,
not just the CGI, life-size animatronics by Stan Winston Studios, perfectly integrated with computer-generated imagery. Jurassic Park and the Jurassic World films are really a gestalt leap from what was even possible the year before using CGI.
so a guy that you and I both know, I'm not going to name him because I'm sort of pissed off at him, but a guy that you and I both know um, actually accompanied Ray Harryhausen to a premiere showing of Jurassic Park. And midway through, Harryhausen said to him, this is according to Mixter X, that my art is over. That's what he said. He was very depressed. He was so overwhelmed with the CGI that he said, "My art is over." Um, I understand why he said that, but I'm very happy to report that since then there have been a number of successful stop motion productions. Nightmare Before Christmas, perhaps the most financially successful. So stop motion is not a dead technique, but I am willing to say that Ray Harryhausen's mastery of that technique still remains supreme. Phil Tippett, I think Phil Tippett is amazing, but I guess maybe it's just my childhood nostalgia that puts Harryhausen at the tippy top.
I don't think it's just that. I think that certain animators brought their own personality to the work.
True, true.
And Willis O'Brien, not later in his career. I mean, I love the later films like Black Scorpion, where Willis O'Brien and Pete Peterson did the animation for
That's a
the.
really good horror film too.
It's a great horror film. And he also worked with Pete Peterson on the next Eugene Laurie dinosaur movie, The Giant Behemoth,
Right?
which we can talk about in a moment. When it was Willis O'Brien doing King Kong, Son of Kong, Mighty Joe Young, you could feel his personality in the movement of the simian characters and the dinosaur creatures. With Harryhausen, I think out of all the American stop motion animation creators who are working with integrating live action and stop motion, Ray Harryhausen and others, including Phil Tippett, use the term puppet film for something like The Nightmare Before Christmas. They see it as a different genre because it's not the integration of live action footage with stop motion animation characters where you accept them as existing on a reality plane closer to our own. Whereas in puppet films, it's an entirely other universe that they exist
Okay.
within. Everything is stop motion. Everything is a miniature set. Everything. And so I accept that definition as well. And I love puppet films as much as I love, the live action fantasy, science fiction, horror films. But Harryhausen brought a real personality to his creatures. There are certain movements that are in his fairy tales that he animated before he started working in feature films that are repeated in some of the creatures he later did. The Emer in 20 Million Miles to Earth, the Cyclops in Seventh Voyage of Sinbad. There's this physicality, this physical acting that Harryhausen brought to his creatures that's instantly recognizable to you and I, whether we consciously or unconsciously respond to it. And I love Phil Tippett's work. And for your magazine, Animato, that you edited for a number of years, I got to interview Phil Tippett. And Phil Tippett was the stop motion animation professional who was working on Jurassic Park when his buddy, Dennis Murin, stepped in and went, "Oh, I think we can do this with CGI." And when the tests were shown to Steven Spielberg, that was it. There was not going to be stop motion puppets. And Phil Tippett said in the conversation I had with him, and he also said in many, many other interviews, like Ray Harryhausen, he thought his art was done. And Murin went, "No, no, no, I need you and I need your team." And a lot of the CGI in those earlier Jurassic Park films were based in part on animatics done with the armatures. And they trusted the stop motion animators to bring to the creatures a sense of weight and balance that CGI was missing. Early CGI, everything looked weightless.
Yeah.
It didn't. You unconsciously recognize, oh, these things aren't in the real world. However realistic the rendering on the skin and the bodies and the muscular was, they didn't look like there was any gravity. And the stop motion animators brought that to it. So Phil Tippett, without going into the details, was the transitional figure between Ray Harryhausen's art, which Ray declared dead when he saw Jurassic Park, and what CGI became. And in fact, Phil Tippett reconfigured his entire Tippett studio around, okay, we're going to continue doing stop motion for ourselves. And he just released, 2 years ago, his feature film Mad God, which I absolutely love.
I've got to
It's
see that. I have not seen that as yet.
oh, it's marvelous, but it's insane. You know, it's this surreal, uh, almost expressionist film. It's a
It's sort of like a
variant on the
Svankmajer
puppet
film,
film.
right?
It's very much like a Jan Svankmajer film, and Jan Svankmajer is a Czech animator who was working since the late 50s, early 60s, doing more abstract, more experimental, more metaphoric films where the stop motion animation was the technique, but he was essentially creating short films and then later features that really have a strong political agenda to them. Mad God is Phil Tippett's mind vomit, if you will. You know, it's just like it is a non-narrative experience. So he was still doing stop motion and is still doing stop motion, but Tippett Studios ended up doing the CGI for the Tremors 2 and 3, the sequels to the film Tremors. He also worked on Starship Troopers, which is probably the one film that most people watching and listening to you right now would be familiar with.
Right.
Tippett Studios did all those incredible giant insects in that film. So Phil Tippett like picked up the torch that Ray laid down. But Ray had already retired. Ray was done after Clash of the Titans. He saw how the business was changing as of Jaws and Star Wars, and he decided he was done. Clash of the Titans was his swan song.
So I think we've established, especially that you know your dino films.
Well, we
Uh,
haven't talked many dino, but yeah, okay, cool.
so we'll get
Um,
to dino films because this is ostensibly what we're going to
yeah,
do.
yeah, it's dino. And in terms of Harryhausen, the dino films, I'd recommend immediately for you to check out if you've never seen them, and if you've seen them, revisit them. Would be The Valley of Gwangi from 1969, one of my favorite all-time dinosaur films, a dino western starring James Franciscus and Hila Golan. And uh, it was a film that bombed when it came out because Warner Brothers didn't know what to do with it. And the fashion of the kind of films that Harryhausen was making had faded for a time. And the other one would be 1 Million Years BC, the remake of the 1940 1 Million BC. Uh, the Harryhausen version is the one starring Raquel Welch. It was a huge worldwide hit. It was one of the biggest moneymakers that Hammer Films ever had. The studio that had made their coin with the Dracula films with Christopher Lee and the Frankenstein films with Peter Cushing, which you and I talked about the Frankenstein films with our last Cine-Geezers conversation. So those are the two Harryhausen dino films I'd steer you to right there. The Valley of Gwangi and 1 Million Years BC. But there are tons of other dino films. And when you and I were growing up on TV, they would pop up on TV all the time.
Oh yeah.
And there were many bad ones, and there were a few good ones. And I primarily am here to talk with you today, Mike, about what constitutes a bad dinosaur movie and which ones would we consider bad dinosaur movies. And I'm not saying bad movies, I'm saying bad dinosaur movies.
And also, we're not saying that the films that are quote unquote bad aren't watchable or enjoyable on some
I
perverse.
love them all. Yes, but I'm brain addled and damaged in many ways.
Okay, I was trying to think of this film. I think it's done by a guy named David Hewitt. It's a dino film that uses plastic toy models that you could get out of a five and dime.
The Mighty Gorga.
There you go. I knew
The
you would.
Mighty Gorga, which did make my list in the brand new book, S.R. Bassett's Tyrant
I have
presents
it too.
Paleo Pop. You have it as well. These are proof copies. Your copy, when you buy it, won't have the little band saying not for resale. This is available on Amazon. And in here is an article entitled Carnosaur Cineasts, in which I pick the 5 dinosaur movies I would name as the worst. And Mike, you have begun with the David Hewitt film, The Mighty Gorga, which is indeed on the list. How did you first experience The Mighty Gorga?
I have never seen it in its entirety. I have seen the trailer, and the trailer
Oh,
was so abysmal
it,
that I said, I only, this is my attitude more and more since I'm 71. I really need to concentrate on watching the stuff that's good as opposed to the stuff that is, I know, I'm going against your
Yeah,
aesthetic
I
here.
don't know, but yeah, okay, I
But
understand though. We're old and we only have so much time,
it
so
was so obvious that these were toys that you could get at any toy store.
not only that, the dinosaurs in the Mighty Gorga are the toys you would not buy at the five and dime that you as a kid would look at and go, these are really crappy. Do you have any of the Marx dinosaur figures? The
Didn't
good
he
ones.
use a hard plastic dino that clearly
Yeah,
was on a stick and you press this and the mouth was
yeah,
open and
yeah, yeah.
closed?
That's the Tyrannosaurus Rex that the King Kong surrogate Gorga battles. And Gorga is actually played by David Hewitt in a rented gorilla suit, but he only wore the head and the chest. You never see all of Mighty Gorga
Could
because
you
he
afford the could you afford the rest?
I don't know if it was a matter of affording or just going, you know what, let's just use a head and chest. Who knows what decisions were made to arrive at the Mighty Gorga. And it's all shot around Los Angeles. So it's all those, botanical gardens and the cave that we've always seen in every
Bronson
film
Canyon.
growing up, Bronson Cavern, which, by the way, I understand now from friends in Los Angeles like David J. Scow, is blocked off from public access. You can no longer go to Bronson Cave. Um, but yeah, the whole film, you're supposed to be in some faraway tropical jungle, and you're actually in Los Angeles. Um, and yeah, it is truly abysmal. It is a truly truly painful, agonizing experience viewing, which is why I love it. I'll have to watch it again after you and I are done talking, just to make sure it's as bad as you and I are saying it truly is.
Now, I'll toss out another title. Um, it's a film that I have seen bits of my entire life. And when I finally got to see the Blu-ray that was released a few years ago, I had a complete 180 in turnaround about my feelings of this film, and that's 1 million BC.
The Victor Mature, Carol Landis original Hal Roach Jr. film from 1940.
It's actually, I mean, from a historic point of view, it's complete fantasy, but it's actually a really good movie
I
that's really
agree.
well done.
Yeah, I agree. And Lon Chaney Jr., Creighton Chaney, gives a terrific performance in it as the elder patriarch of the tribe, the father who throws Victor Mature out of the cave, ejects him from the tribe, exiles him, which kicks off the whole narrative. Yeah, I think I've always thought it was a very good film. I first experienced it as a kid, only seeing excerpts from it. There was an 8 millimeter company called Castle Films,
Oh yeah.
and they would release these little 50-foot, which were about 5 minutes long, or 200-foot 8 millimeter reels. The 200-foot reels were about 12 minutes to
Yep.
15 minutes long. And they excerpted two chunks of 1 million BC. So the Castle film reel called Battle of the Giants was the fight that Victor Mature and Carol Landis witnessed between supposedly a Dimetrodon and a dinosaur. It's actually a pygmy alligator with a rubber fin on its back and a monitor lizard with no rubber adornments. And there is a truly savage battle between these two reptiles. And the other reel, which was just called 1 million BC, was the end of the film where one of the tribes is trapped in their cave by a giant iguana. And Victor Mature coordinates Lon Chaney Jr., his father, and other members of the tribe to drop rocks on the dinosaur and thus rescue the tribe. They bury the dinosaur in a landslide. That's how I first saw the film. So those two pieces. We didn't have a projector, but our relative Uncle Roger Rabideau, loved showing films in his living room, and he collected those reels. So I got to see those two again and again. One of them also featured the volcano eruption, which is still a masterpiece of early special effects. There is a stunning shot in that 1941 million BC where um, the support player cave woman, not the star Carol Landis, but the next up in the pecking order cave woman ends up running for her life, and she ends up getting swept under a sweep of lava that completely envelops her, and it is still an astonishing shot. All done with process work, but brilliantly done. The special effects were led by a team that Roy Seaworth led, and it was nominated for an Academy Award. Didn't win, but the film was nominated for an Oscar for special effects for that year.
Now,
Yeah, it holds up really well. I think it's a good
so
movie.
the film as a whole, to me, when I saw it, which was just a few years ago, I never, one day you and I can talk about what we could watch and what we couldn't watch when we were growing up, and it was all based on what TV stations had, basically.
Right, right.
But uh, what I had seen was those lizard fights that then obviously the Hal Roach people sold to anyone who had money
Yeah,
to
yeah, yeah.
include in any film where they wanted to have dinosaurs.
Right,
And in fact, there is there was a video put out by Good Times Video called Horrible Horror with the late and great Zachary, and there is a clip in it that shows the handlers trying to get these two lizards to actually fight.
right.
And it's sort of sad, to be
It
perfectly
is,
frank.
and it was a form of animal cruelty that was no longer permitted once the animal rights people began to assert their power in Hollywood. But even that took a while. It was one thing to ban tripwires for horses because any human being goes, of course, horses are sentient creatures. Reptiles, being lower in the perception of most people in terms of the evolutionary ladder, were not attended to with the same kind of care. So that footage appeared well into the 60s and early 70s in film and television. And Hal Roach didn't just license the footage from 1 million BC, they also licensed the outtakes. So sometimes we'd be watching a film like Two Lost Worlds, and the film, this film was promoted with dinosaurs on the poster, and yet the only dinosaurs in it appear in the last 5 minutes of the film. And if you are a kid who kept with it on TV, it's a pirate movie essentially. To
Yes.
see the dinosaurs like little Stevie, you were very disappointed when it got to the end, and all it was the 1 million BC dino fight, just a little excerpt of it playing on a rear projection screen behind James Arness. That
So
end of movie.
I guess my caveat is the original film, well worth watching.
Yeah.
The footage inserted into cheap adventure or quote dinosaur movies, not so much.
Well,
Not so much love for that.
and it was also, I mean, it popped up in Tarzan's Desert Mystery. It popped up in one of the Jungle Jim films, Jungle Manhunt. However, I will insert one caveat. There are certain films like Untamed Women from 1952, a film completely constructed around 1 million BC to the point of matching the costumes of all the characters in 1 million BC. And the Columbia Pictures release of Valley of the Dragons is also a film entirely constructed around footage from 1 million BC from 1940. Right to the point of having the two white men who have been transported from the 1800s on a comet to a prehistoric part of the comet. They lose their civilized clothes so that they can dress exactly like Lon Chaney Jr. and Victor Mature. So the integration of the footage is seamless with 1 million BC. There's part of me, and as I've gotten older, Mike, and wiser about how films are made, that still has an admiration for the sheer chutzpah of building an entire feature film as late as 1962 around footage that anyone could see on TV any given week, anywhere in the country, and still, Columbia goes, sure, let's do. That's a good idea. Let's do that. So, and those are the only two films I would cite that I think work. Untamed Women, which many people despise, but I kind of admire. It's the first GIs shipwrecked on an island. So it's kind of the beginning of the war that time forgot in the
Right.
comic books, right? Star Spangled War stories. So it's the beginning of that trope in terms of film. Um, and Valley of the Dragons, which is a terrible film, but a very entertaining film, much more ambitious in having Neanderthals, and there's this weird cave tribe that have kind of like aluminum foil over their eye sockets and long blonde hair. They look a bit like the Morlocks
I
in
was
the
going to say
George
that
Pal the
sounds
Time
awfully
Machine.
Morlocky.
Yeah, very Morlocky. So, that showed some ambition that they were trying to do something different. But of those films, my pick for the worst is Two Lost Worlds.
Now
And
that's the one that I just saw on DVD, and then I gave you the DVD with
you
James
gave me the disc.
Arness.
You went, Steve, I'm never going to look at this again in my life.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. And that is, I mean, in terms of the history of cinema, it's interesting because it was originally a TV pilot that it was decided they would take the TV pilot and release it theatrically. So, and this is in 1950-51. So it's a very early example of an attempt to sell a TV series that failed, and the producers deciding, or the money people deciding, well, let's put this out theatrically instead. And it played all through the 50s. It was reissued at least 4 times theatrically. So somebody made a fair amount of coin off that
Sure.
complete piece of dreck called Two Lost Worlds,
Okay, so Two Lost Worlds and the David Hewitt film are
right? The Mighty
two of your
Gorga.
worst. Two of the
Yes,
worst.
yes, yes.
Okay, let's have another worst one.
Well, okay. And my criteria for worst is if you promise me something in the poster, like these two dinosaurs fighting, and you sell the film as prehistoric, primitive, primeval monsters of 100 million years ago, alive again today, that's how you're selling the film. Or you sell it to me as a TV viewer with the little bullet in TV Guide saying there's dinosaurs. And all you give me is about 3 minutes of 1 million BC excerpts. That is a bad movie in my world. You have ripped me off. Okay. Mighty Gorga is different criteria. Mighty Gorga promised on the poster a giant Kong-like gorilla. Well, that is delivered in the film, but if it's David Hewitt only wearing the head and shoulders of a gorilla suit, and you use plastic dinosaurs that you bought from a five and dime bin at Ben Franklin or Woolworths or the equivalent, that is the bad dinosaur movie. So another example, if you promise me a dinosaur and yet it's an invisible dinosaur, okay, then I'm never going to see that. You're never going to show me this fits the criteria of a quote bad unquote dinosaur movie. And that film is The Sound of Horror, which was double billed here in America with one of my favorite horror films, Kill Baby Kill, directed by Mario Bava. The Sound of Horror, it's actually a fairly fun movie when you watch it. It's a siege horror film, right? Remember Fiend Without a Face, Mike? One of you,
My fiend is right over there.
there you go. You've got a fiend in
I
your
do.
studio. And we should explain to people what the fiend is.
Fiend Without a Face was a film produced by Richard Gordon in which a scientist working with atomic energy somehow, with the amount of radiation, there are these creatures who are, should I get the fiend? He's right
Yes,
over
get the
here.
fiend. I will speak as. So what the scientist done is he's trying to materialize psychic energy, trying to materialize human thought. And what he ends up doing accidentally is creating these sentient brain monsters, which are stop motion animated in the film. They are brains on spinal columns. There we go. There we
Ah!
go. And they wrap around your neck with their spinal column and suck your brain out from the back
Right.
of your skull.
This is a proper life-size fiend. This was constructed by a special effects guy who's in Hollywood, whose name I have temporarily forgotten. He made two of these. These are complete as prototypes. He bought the license from my friend Richard Gordon, who produced the film. This was going to be something that he put out for horror fans as a kit, as a model kit.
I'd have bought one in a
It it
heartbeat, but
it never really happened,
yeah.
unfortunately. And so now, many years later, I still have the Fiend. He gave the Fiend a mouth, by the way. There's the Fiend's mouth.
Oh, that's really perverse. Oh my God.
He said that when you watch the film and the Fiend attaches like this to
It
you,
has to have something that goes
it
in the
has
base of
to
your neck.
have a means to basically suck your brain out because that's what it does. It's feeding
Okay.
on people's brains.
So that
So,
film is from 1958. And the reason it's relevant to this conversation is 10 years, a full decade before George Romero and John Russo's Night of the Living Dead, Fiend Without a Face essentially codified the siege horror movie,
right,
where the entire movie is going to build up to kind of the equivalent of the Westerns, right? The Westerns, where it was going to end with the attack of the Native American tribe on the wagon train, right? Where they circle the wagons and defend themselves. Fiend Without a Face was not the first, but one of the first, and certainly one of the best siege science fiction horror films that ended with the characters trapped in a building where these brain creatures are breaking their way in the windows and doors to get at human prey. And, you know, for most of you, Night of the Living Dead would be that film, right? The
right.
film that codified the siege horror film. Sound of Horror is an earlier example from 2 years before Night of the Living Dead of another attempt to do a siege horror movie. But when the siege is an invisible dinosaur, you know, it's just not that impressive. Now, the classic siege horror film that most people have seen would be Alfred Hitchcock's The Birds, where the
Right.
entire film builds and builds and builds to our key characters shut and boarded up in their house because the birds are going to mount this attack on them. And Hitchcock had to figure out, how do I do that? Right. And the special effects of the birds attacking, when you actually see the film, are things like, you know, beaks drilling into boards and doors. And it doesn't really become real until poor Tippi Hedren goes up those stairs into the room that she hears a noise from, and she alone is attacked by the birds. Sound of Horror tries to do that with an invisible dinosaur. It's a fun movie in part because that's a silly conceit. It's a fun movie because it's a Spanish film. And by this point in 1966, even though it's in black and white, it's pretty gory for a mid 1960s film. We never see the invisible dinosaur, but we see the attack of the invisible dinosaurs, which involves characters having their faces ripped open and their throats ripped open and a lot of fake gore. So it's fun for that reason. It's kind of an early gore film, um, and it's fun because it has an interesting cast, including the great Ingrid Pitt, who once, in front of my friend G. Michael Dobbs, completely mortified me on a panel at ChillerCon that I was the moderator of. And as a result, any film with Ingrid Pitt, I have a soft spot in my skull for. So
I should say, Ingrid Pitt was absolutely lovely. I've rewatched a bunch of her Hammer horror films recently,
The
and
Vampire Lovers, Countess Dracula, yeah,
she was a very effective actress, stone cold gorgeous in person, and there is the photo of you and Ingrid
yeah,
where she's running her hand up and down your back on your spine, playing with
yeah.
you while you're taking the picture. And folks, Stephen R. Bissett is a very loyal husband. You could tell he was very uncomfortable with all this. I do admit I took a little bit of satisfaction in
I'm
having it
sure you did. I must have
come.
been beat red while Ingrid was running her fingers up and down my spine. So,
Okay, so what's another film on this infamous list?
well, another film on the infamous list. So now we have touched upon Two Lost Worlds, The Sound of Horror, The Mighty Gorga. I would have to include in this list the Jungle Jim movie, Jungle Manhunt. And I know, Mike, that you're peppering our conversation today with clips from films like The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms trailer, The Giant Behemoth, which we'll talk about in a moment, Gorgo, which I'll certainly talk about in a moment, and others. if you can find the trailer for Jungle Manhunt, the Jungle Jim film,
I will
in
do
that
that.
trailer, they show us Jungle Jim wrestling with a man-sized dinosaur-like creature. It's a uh, very convincing looking man in suit, giant lizard, or small dinosaur. Choose your species that you would tag it as. However, in the clip, when they show the wrestling match, there's two things wrong with it. One, it laughs like a hyena. They have overdubbed hyena sounds. So it is a giggling dinosaur. Secondly, it looks like it is involved in sexual coitus with Johnny Weissmuller in the footage that you fleetingly see in the trailer. Now, why is it on my bad dinosaur movie list?
I
Well,
can't imagine since the Johnny Weissmuller Jungle Jim movies were so well made.
they were polished in their way. These were Sam Katzman films that were ground out for very little money, comprised primarily of Johnny Weissmuller and the other cast members walking around jungle sets. There's a lot of what David Scow calls shoe leather, a lot of characters walking to and from places. Um, but they're pretty polished. I mean, they use a lot of excerpts and film clips from other Columbia films and serials, which all the B films that Columbia was putting out used. The crime films, the comedy films, all of them were built around that kind of use. But why is Jungle Manhunt on the bad dino list? Well, that man-sized dinosaur appears in the trailer, which I never saw as a kid. That man-sized dinosaur appears on the poster, which I never saw as a kid, but I later saw at conventions, and I went, "Oh my God, there's that thing that was in the trailer." So why did I feel cheated? Well, it's not in the movie at all. In fact, the only dinosaurs in the entirety of Jungle Manhunt, as in Two Lost Worlds, is that fighting pygmy alligator versus monitor lizard from 1 million BC. So I felt cheated, right? Now, Tarzan's Desert Mystery, also starring Johnny Weissmuller, playing Tarzan, not Jungle Jim. The only dinosaurs in it are also the exact same footage from 1 million BC. But at the end of Tarzan's Desert Mystery, there is a giant spider.
I
And
remember that.
it
I
is
remember that.
huge. Yeah, it's the size of a pickup truck. And it was an actual model that someone in the special effects department built, and it glides over the villain. I think Otto Kruger played the Nazi villain in that film. So I didn't feel cheated. I got a really cool looking giant spider at the end of Tarzan's Desert Mystery. I didn't get, I think all I got was those goddamn 1 million BC alligator versus monitor footage.
I think we should.
So I felt more cheated after I saw the poster and then the trailer, and I realized that what would have been a highlight of the film, if not the highlight of the film, the hyena giggling dinosaur trying to, rape Jungle Jim, was gone from the film. That made it a bad dinosaur entry for me in my list.
So every time we mention Sam Katzman in these podcasts, and I'm sure
Yeah,
he's going to come up over and over and over.
yeah,
We
yeah.
have to remind people. The whole article is in my book on Tom Tyler. Sam Katzman said he made moron movies. He says he made movies for morons. Um, and yes, we're both morons.
We're morons.
Sam Katzman was capable of making a good movie. He was. That werewolf movie they did in the
The
50s
Werewolf from 1957, that
is an
56. It's an excellent.
excellent, an excellent low budget horror movie with a werewolf. It really works on every level. The only thing I can think of is that Sam was only moderately involved in it.
Well, and Sam Katzman, let's not forget, he produced the first two Ray Harryhausen Charles Schneer films.
Right.
It Came from Beneath the Sea and Earth versus the Flying Saucers, both of which are pretty terrific 1950s science fiction films,
Yes.
both of which are pretty excellent Ray Harryhausen films. And Earth versus the Flying Saucers, I put right up there with the George Powell War of the Worlds of best alien invasion films of the 1950s, hands down. Um, And those were Sam Katzman productions. Now, Sam Katzman was capable of making good films, but Mike
So
did
before we move on to your next
my net right,
bad one,
right.
we got to talk about Unknown Island because
We
I
do.
have such a soft spot in my heart for Unknown Island.
I love Unknown Island. I'm with
And it
you.
is the reason I'm bringing this up. It has guys in dino suits. And it
And
does it shows us the guys in dino suits.
a
There's
lot,
no,
a lot.
it's like someone invested in these suits and damn it, they're gonna be seen in this movie.
Right, right. And as Bob Burns related in an article in Film Facts magazine, Bob Burns was a young man, a teenager, and he got to go on the set, the filming of Unknown Island. He was there one of the days they were filming the guys in the dinosaur suits when they're battling with Crash Corrigan, who took his ape suit and modified the head so that he was a quote giant sloth unquote. Doesn't look even remotely like a giant sloth, but that's what they call it in the film.
God bless Crash Corrigan.
Exactly. And Crash Corrigan gives it his all. Like he plays that, whatever the hell it is, as a vicious, dangerous creature, and convincingly so. But the guys in the dinosaur suits, Bob Burns says it was over 105 degrees that day, and they are in these 8 to 9 foot dinosaur outfits. And there is actual footage in the film where one of them falls over. The guy had heat stroke and passed out. The filmmakers went, "Oh, let's dub a gunshot over that." So when you're watching the film, it's supposed to be the dinosaur gets shot and falls over. Understand you're actually seeing whatever poor bastard was strapped into that suit passing out, almost giving his life for the cause of one of the first man in suit dinosaur movies.
And by the
Not the
way, folks,
first.
it's got a really good B movie cast. Richard Denning is
Oh,
in it,
yeah.
Virginia Gray is in it, Barton McLean, right?
Barton McLean is the villain. He gives a great performance in it.
So
Yes.
these are very capable performers. Um, and there was enough of a budget to create this concept, and it's not exactly laughable. It's like they really
No,
work. Plus, if I remember correctly, they shot it in Cinecolor.
right. Which was a low budget form of color that was basically a two-tone colored process. It has a very pastel, soft pastel look to it that I really like. You know, it kind of looks like those tinted postcards that were
Yeah.
around when you and I were kids. Yeah, and it's the first color dinosaur feature film. And I'll also add, I mean, bear in mind, 1933 King Kong, huge worldwide hit. RKO reissues it every time they were low on money. It got reissued at least 4 times between 1933 and 1952. Um, After King Kong, RKO rushed into production. In fact, it was released the same year, the end of 1933, Son of Kong. So now we have two sound dinosaur movies, 1933. And then nothing until 1940, Hal Roach and Hal Roach Jr., working with D.W. Griffith, as a matter of fact, make 1 million BC, black and white dinosaur movie, cavemen and dinosaurs. It did well, but it wasn't a huge hit. There was nothing else like it again until 8 years later, the producers of Unknown Island made the first color dinosaur movie. So Unknown Island is only the fourth sound era American dinosaur movie. Okay. And I'm not counting things like the Universal Flash Gordon serial where they land on the planet Mongo and there's some giant lizards and there's a man in suit dragon creature that Glenn Strange is actually in the suit. That's not really dinosaurs. So Unknown Island is pretty key. It's the fourth American dinosaur feature film. It's on DVD. It was released legally on DVD. It hasn't come out yet on Blu-ray. I hope somebody will put it out because it's a fun little movie.
Yeah.
And I think it holds up. But you will be entertained by the risible man in suit dinosaur effects when you watch it. They aren't only man in suit. There's also a Dimetrodon, which is a model, live action model, full size. They took the fin off the model, and Sam Katzman later used it in the first Jungle Jim movie.
I just got to,
And
you bring up Jungle Jim again. I just got to say this. At some point, Sam Katzman and or Columbia lost the rights that King Features offered to Jungle Jim, which was a very good comic strip in the 1930s by Alex
Alex
Raymond.
Raymond. Alex Raymond, right?
So it had been turned into a serial by Universal in the 1930s. So when they lost the rights, the last films in the series was Johnny Weissmuller playing Johnny Weissmuller
Yeah.
in the jungle. It's Johnny Weissmuller is now suddenly this African hero explorer guy. It's like Katzman was saying, screw you, King Features. We're still going to do the same goddamn stuff. We just
and
won't call it Jungle Jim.
and didn't he do the same thing? I mean, with the Tom Tyler connection, didn't he do the same thing with the Phantom? He had lost the license for from King Features for Lee Falk's comic strip, The Phantom.
So in the 1940s, Katzman was making serials at Columbia, among other things. I mean, he was a very busy producer. He did a really decent serial adaptation of Lee Falk's The Phantom, and Tom is wonderful in it. So fast forward a few years, and Katzman said, "Hey, we're going to remake it. We've already made it. We can put someone else in the Phantom suit, but it's going to be Tom Tyler and all the long shots and all that stuff." And then he started shooting it. There are stills of John Hart in the Phantom suit. And then he got the bad news. Columbia says, "We no longer have the rights." Now, I haven't made myself watch The Adventures of Captain Africa. It
I'm
is
surprised, Mike.
it is it is universally deemed, I should say, as one of the worst serials ever made.
Really?
Oh yes, because the hero of the serial, Captain Africa, played in a by John Hart in a look-alike Phantom outfit, um, appears very little actually in the serial.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Um, if I find it, maybe you and I can watch a chapter sometime, and,
Yeah,
and we can
yeah. We'll
feel the
make some
pain.
popcorn and share the pain.
But
That's an important part
yes.
of these,
So
right?
let's see. You said you had five movies on
Yeah,
this
there's
list?
one more to go, and the poster is behind me. And it's the film that was not released in America theatrically. It did play elsewhere in the world, and it is an Ivan Tors production called
Oh,
Island of the Lost. And not only is it an Ivan Tors production, but let me peek back at the poster here. It was co-written by Riku Browning, the man who played the creature from the Black Lagoon. And Riku Browning is the man who created Flipper for Ivan Tors, right? The very popular dolphin, Boy and His Dolphin movies that MGM made a lot of money off of, and it became a TV series on NBC. And
I
it's
think
direct,
everyone, if you've not heard of Ivan Tors, the only reference that most people have is for Flipper
right?
and then for Daktari, which was his two successful television series that focused basically on animals.
True.
Um,
And
and
he
did he
also
do
has
Gentle
success with
Bend as
he
well?
did Gentle Ben. I was about to
Okay.
say he also did Gentle Ben, and he also produced the film Maya, the film set in India with the elephant,
And
which
with Dennis,
also was a TV
Dennis,
series.
uh, leave it to
Jay North,
Jay North of Dennis the Menace was in that.
right, right, exactly. So Ivan Tors, was a very successful producer for of feature films and TV series in the 50s and 60s, particularly in the 60s. But this is not one of his successful, and also involved with the production, although he's not on camera, none other than Richard Carlson, the
Really?
star of It Came from Outer Space, I Aim at the Stars. Richard Carlson is in the Valley of Gwangi. He's one of the key support players in Ray Harryhausen and Charles Schneer's Valley of Gwangi. Richard Carlson was a mainstay in 50s science fiction and genre films. He's in The Maze. A lot of terrific work that he
He
did.
did a lot of TV work too.
He
And
did.
if I'm correct, I believe he did a series, I Was a Communist for the FBI,
Yeah, yeah,
in which he
exactly.
plays an undercover agent
Right.
uh,
He's on
infiltrating
the side of
communist
good.
cells here in the
He's
United
on
States.
this right during the Cold War.
Yeah.
So, this is the team behind the film. Ivan Tors, Riku Browning, Richard Carlson. The cast is Richard Green,
Oh, the
who's
British actor.
Robin Hood,
Yeah.
right? And you grew up seeing Robin Hood on TV. I grew up seeing Robin Hood on TV, right?
Yeah, he had a very
Syndicated.
long career in primarily British films, but
And
um,
co-starring in the film is Luke Halpin, who was the teenage kid in Flipper,
oh, okay.
right? So, and I now have been married not to one, but two women who have admitted they had crushes on Luke Halpin when they were kids. So Luke was like an early teen idol who never made it really. He never got on the cover of Teen Beat. So I guess he wasn't a big heartthrob, but you know. Anyway, they were the ones who worked on Island of the Lost, and it is not a good movie. Um, why is it on my bad dinosaur list? Well, there's a couple of reasons. Number one, as I pointed out earlier when I revealed the image on the poster, the so-called dinosaurs are played by alligators with rubber fins and horns on them. And they don't even bother trying to use special effects to make them look big. They're just alligators with rubber horns and fins on them. There's one point in the film where a character is bitten by one of these venomous reptiles. And instead of a bite on his arm that looks like an alligator bit his arm, which would in the real world mean probably no arm, there's two little pinpricks on his arm. We're supposed to believe like it's like snake venom bites, right? Doesn't work. The other prehistoric monsters on the Island of the Lost are ostriches, who have this crap glued to their beak to look like teeth, like a pteranodon or a pterosaur would have. And these ostriches are also not blown up with special effects photography to look gigantic. They just stomp things to death. Early in the film, they stomp a peccary to death. And later in the film, they almost stomp a human being to death. The other prehistoric menace are German shepherds with fake fangs, so they look like saber-toothed dogs.
Oh, that's just like oh geez, I'm
Monster on
having
the Campus.
well, I was also thinking about oh the little rodent that becomes
Oh,
giant.
the killer shrews.
Killer shrews.
The
That was
killer
the same
shrews.
effect
It was, but with the killer shrews, they actually built shrew suits to put over the dogs. These are just German shepherds
with
with
teeth.
with big teeth. Now, this still wouldn't make it a bad dinosaur movie in my world because, you know, the poster promises me an alligator with fins, and the movie delivers alligator with fins. And the movie promises a volcano. The poster does. And there is a volcano. Like with almost all these Lost World movies, there's a volcano that goes off at the end and causes the island to sink, or is the cataclysm that drives the human characters off the island. It has all that. In fact, there's an element of Island of the Lost that should elevate it into the pantheon of great 60s important science fiction films, which is, despite what it says on Wikipedia, which is wrong, it is the first Bermuda Triangle movie.
Wow.
They are in the Bahamas. They say they are in the Bermuda area. Their ship goes off course because suddenly there's a magnetic effect where none of the compasses work. And the Richard Green's character says, yes, a lot of ships and planes have disappeared around here. It is the first Bermuda Triangle movie before anybody other than readers of men's magazines like Argosy and Saga had ever heard of the Bermuda Triangle. But it's still on my bad dinosaur movie list because it is boring. Now, it is boring in part because one of the highlights in this film is Luke Halpin builds this sort of xylophone out of pieces of bamboo, and the movie stops dead while Luke and his buddy play a really moronic piece of music on this. It's just it's Swiss Family Robinson without the Swiss and without the Robinson. It's just sort of this lame people shipwrecked on an island movie that doesn't go much of anywhere. And I do have to bring a modicum of maturity and taste to the viewing of these films, even if, yes, it's the Mighty Gorga. I would rather watch the Mighty Gorga again than Island of the Lost. I don't know
Wow.
how else to put it to you, Mike, as a Cine-Geezer, fellow Cine-Geezer. Now, this also never was recognized as a feature film. You will not find this in a list of made for TV genre works. You will not find this in a list of dinosaur movies. This was dumped onto the ABC network when Chuck Jones and ABC decided they wanted to compete with Walt Disney's Wonderful World of Color. And they created a program to slot opposite Walt Disney on Sunday nights called The Wonderful Wizard of Oz.
Ooh,
And
I don't remember that at all. I must
the
never have seen it.
framing device of the show, it was actually called Off to See the Wizard. That was the name of the show. The framing device of the show were animated footage of Dorothy and the characters from Oz introducing the film. And then they would show, usually in two parts, and that was the case with Island of the Lost. It was broadcast in two episodes. They would break up all these films that MGM had licensed to Off to See the Wizard. So they showed, a couple of the Ivan Torres films that we've mentioned. They showed a number of family films that only were shown as two-parters on Off to See the Wizard. It never scored in the ratings. They could not compete with Disney. Nobody could compete with Disney
No.
for that Sunday night slot. And it folded after a single season. And that's where Island of the Lost was lost. It was a
Now, do you remember
two-parter.
what year that was?
Yes, as a matter of fact, here in my book, Paleo Pop, I actually
Buy it now.
buy it now. It's available on Amazon. I actually reproduce the TV guide listing for the film
Okay.
and the TV guide ad for the film. And it premiered in 1967, November of 1967. And that was it. And in the TV guide ad, they did not promote Island of the Lost. It was just Off to See the Wizard. There was like no push behind this film. This film was literally dumped by Ivan Tors. Now, Ivan Tors was releasing things theatrically like Around the World Under the Sea, right? Lloyd
Yep.
Bridges.
Yep.
By the way, that was one of Ivan Tors' big hits in the 50s, early 60s. Lloyd Bridges' Sea Hunt. That was an Ivan Tors production. So, Ivan Tors was producing all this stuff, and he looked at Island of the Lost and went, no, no, I don't think so. I'm not going to put any more money behind this. And it just got dumped on Off to See the Wizard. So it really is a lost made for TV movie. And I love made for TV genre films. And many of the ones that most people would consider lame movies, I love very much. But Under the Lost is hard to love. Hard to love. It
The
has
reason
been
I
released on VHS and DVD. It was released both in America and Canada on DVD, and it was very deceptively packaged. In fact, the Canadian DVD release has the face of this Lovecraftian fish man on the cover, and there is no fish man anywhere in the film. So,
the reason I asked about the date is that I had no idea that even happened that Chuck Jones was doing it because around that time he actually had a season or two a Saturday morning show called The Curiosity Shop
that's right. That's right.
that combined new animation with a lot of the Zagreb Yugoslavian animation, among other things. And
Wow.
so I'm just like, it sounds like he had a deal at ABC at that time to do stuff. And I'm sure I could do some research to find out more, but I found that very, very interesting.
Well, here's I'm quoting now from my write up in Paleo Pop. The Chuck Jones animated wraparounds bracketed MGM Library chestnuts, all broadcast in two parts, like Lily, Gypsy Colt, The Glass Slipper, the 1960 The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, uh, a number of documentaries, including Untamed World, Captain Sinbad, the Byron Haskin fantasy that MGM released that had the star of Zorro
Yeah.
playing Captain Sinbad, Flipper, Zebra in the Kitchen, another Ivan Tors theatrical animal hit. Oh, this was a big hit. Remember Clarence the Cross-Eyed Lion?
That was a big hit.
That was a big theatrical hit, and that's what became Daktari because
Yep.
Clarence was on Daktari. Rhino, which was the most adult of the films that were shown on Off to See the Wizard, that was an Ivan Tors production with Robert Culp. Um, Africa, Texas Style, which was also an Ivan Tors feature, and an orphan called Mike and the Mermaid from 1964 that I've never seen and never heard of otherwise, and Island of the Lost.
Oh.
So it was this really odd show, you know, and no wonder Island of the Lost is lost.
Well, I know that as usual, we've been yakking and yakking. I
We've
gotta
gone way
get
over
back.
time, I'm sure, but we should touch on a couple of the films that, you know, before we leave. Eugene Laurie, after doing Beast and 20,000 Fathoms, returned to the dinosaur genre. Like a lot of filmmakers, he was frustrated. Like he was still doing production design for tons of movies. He even worked with Sam Fuller on films like The Naked Kiss and Shock Corridor in the early 60s. And he also got to work on some big budget productions. He co-directed Krakatoa, East
East
of
of Java.
Java, which was a Cinerama film. By the way, it wasn't East of Java; it was West of Java.
But
So
the
the
title.
title, I
You're
know.
saying that they lied?
So Eugene Laurie, whenever he would get offered a job to direct, it was another dinosaur movie. In fact, originally, what became the Giant Behemoth was going to be a blob movie, and the producers in England, it was a co-production between America and Great Britain, decided, no, 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 no. We want another dinosaur movie. We want it just like Beast from 20,000 Fathoms. And that was made in 1959, played in America first under the title of The Giant Behemoth, which in my estimation is much like the title Manos, Hands of Fate, because Manos means hands. So it's hands, hands of fate. And
And a
the giant
behemoth is
behemoth,
big.
yeah, the giant giant. So, and it's an interesting film, and I write it up in length in Paleo Pop. There's an entire chapter in here, an article for which I was nominated for a Rondo Award for that article. I did not win. Um, and then Eugene Laurie was commissioned by MGM and the King brothers to make what I consider one of the great monster movies of the 60s, Gorgo.
And I just want to interrupt for a moment to say that there is a spectacular Blu-ray of Gorgo out there that you had a major part in. And the restored Gorgo is really beautiful in this new Blu-ray.
Technicolor. I mean, for the first time, we're seeing the film in Technicolor since it was released. Yeah, it looked. Vinegar Syndrome put it together, and apart from my participation, I highly recommend it.
No, no, you did great in it, and it is a film that I believe is well worth watching for any science fiction slash horror fan. It's got a really interesting theme. It was well done, and
it
even though it was not stop motion,
it's
I
man
think
in
that
suit.
it was a spectacular man in a suit, and you could tell that Eugene Laurie knew how to stage this stuff for the maximum realism and the maximum dramatic effect.
Yeah, and he worked with a top drawer special effects crew led by Tom Howard, who was under. Tom Howard was MGM's go-to special effects miniature guy, and Tom Howard supervised the effects, but Eugene Laurie designed the Gorgo monster and everything. That film's very near and dear to my heart, also because it was turned into a comic book. And the comic book Gorgo, published by Charlton Comics out of Connecticut, was one of my all is still one of my all-time favorite monster comics, particularly the issues drawn by Steve Ditko,
Right.
who brought a lot of energy and life to it. So that also is discussed not only in the first volume of Paleo Pop, but right now, designer Tim Pax and I are working on volume 2 of Paleo Pop, which has a chapter on Steve Ditko's run in the Charlton Comics Gorgo. I should also mention, and I don't have a copy to hold up for you, right now, available from Amazon, Richard Clemenson's zine, Little Shop of Horrors, published a spectacular Bible-sized issue. It is a book. It's not a zine issue. Little Shop of Horrors number 52, you can buy it on Amazon, is entirely dedicated to the making of Eugene Laurie's Gorgo, and it is an amazing piece of scholarly work, full of illustrations, behind the scene illustrations I'd never seen before. and I contributed a chapter to the book about the comic book series. So
So I want to just tell people, Dick Clemenson has agreed to come on Cine-Geezers. We're going to schedule him as soon as possible because we really want people to be aware of his work on Little Shop of Horrors, um, which started out as a fanzine, what, 30 years ago, at least
yeah,
40 years ago?
1971, 72. I mean, I mail ordered the first issue when it was announced, and
I still have my first couple of issues.
yeah.
Regretfully, just because of life, I didn't keep up with it, although I need to order some issues and I will. But Richard Clemenson will be here to talk about that. Um, and that will be in an upcoming edition of this podcast.
So before we go, Mike, I mean, we've gone way over time. We always do.
Yeah, we do.
What do you have out right now that people can go and pick up?
Well,
Your Tom
I've got
Tyler book,
the
we
Tom
should
Tyler
talk about.
book is out on Barnes and Noble and Amazon and other online booksellers.
And the title is?
The Films and Life of Tom Tyler, Cowboy, Monster, Hero. And it relates the life of this actor who is best known today as being the lead in Adventures of Captain Marvel, being the mummy, Carice, in The Mummy's Hand, and being the Phantom in the serial produced by the aforementioned Sam Katzman. But he had a very unusual career arc for a guy who was a B Western cowboy.
Yeah.
I'll just say that most of these guys, once their time was up in terms of popularity, they just sort of faded away. Um, if I was to do another book about a B Western guy, it would be about Crash Corrigan, Ray Crash Corrigan,
Ooh, I'd buy that book from you.
because like Tom, he aspired to do something more than just be in B Westerns. And Tom aspirations came true as he was part of John Ford, director John Ford's stock company, and appeared in quite a number of Ford films. Um, Ray Corrigan, after his time was done, he very smartly bought real estate, then built a Western town that other producers could use as a location. Later on, that Western town became, he would open it up for tourists, and they do Wild West shows there. But he appeared in a number of films in his ape suit. The guy was an entrepreneur, and eventually sold Corriganville to Bob Hope, and he made a ton of money. And part of Corriganville still exists as a park in Southern California. The buildings apparently been all been taken down, but some of the roadways and the set of the locations are still there. The rock locations. Um, Interesting guy. I'm glad that
Yeah.
we could bring up Ray Corrigan in this.
Yeah, let's, and I'll mention as we sign off. Not only can you now pick up Paleo Pop Volume One on Amazon, but Mike's and my mutual friend Mark Mastel curated and designed a new sketchbook of my work, In the Mood for Monsters. And this is also out now on Amazon in both a black and white paperback and a color paperback edition. And as I always do when we're done, I also want to recommend a book that neither you or I have anything to do with. I read a lot of graphic novels, and the one I'm going to recommend today for fellow Cine-Geezers is Tim Stout and Joe Flood's The Great Depression, From Hard Times to the New Deal. It's a really excellent analysis and overview of the Depression, but it's presented as a narrative that young readers would get into. It's set up as a game that two teenagers who don't ever want to help their mom with chores start playing, and they find themselves living in the Depression era. And it's a pretty ingenious setup and framing device. And out of all the graphic novels I've read recently, The Great Depression is one that I think fellow Cine-Geezers out there would enjoy. Perfect Christmas gift, folks.
I do not have a book right now that I want to talk about, but I do want to mention two documentaries that I think our audience would be interested in. The first is a documentary that's available to rent online from a number of sources. I did it from YouTube, and it's about comic book artist and illustrator Drew Friedman, and it is fabulous. Uh, it actually has I would love to get Drew Friedman on our show to talk
Let's
about.
give it a go. Maybe
I
he'll talk
will.
to
I
us, you
will.
know?
Um, Drew Friedman is this incredible illustrator. He's been around for years. He's done a number of books, and he loves some of the bizarre movie figures that we love. Um, that's number one. I mean, and I rented it for $4 on YouTube. It's essential viewing. Also essential viewing is the brand new documentary about Mad Magazine, which is up on the Tubi streaming
I
service.
also found it on Netflix. Marge and I are going to check it out
Oh,
this
it's on
week.
Netflix as well.
I
Okay,
believe there can't be two Mad documentaries, can there?
I don't know.
We'll find out. You
It's extremely well done. Uh, you know, I will just say Mad played. I was never allowed to read Mad as a kid. For some reason, my mother thought Cracked was acceptable, but Mad wasn't. But as soon as was I in high school, I started reading Mad, and uh, the film makes the point about how influential it was for people of our generation, for the baby movers. That Mad was the magazine that taught us don't trust people, don't trust advertising, don't trust politicians. Um, it really had a social conscience that was done in a wonderfully funny and satiric way. I think it made a great impression on a lot of people. A lot of our favorite Mad artists are involved in this film. We're involved with this film. Unfortunately, close. Unfortunately, of course, William M. Gaines, the publisher of Mad, had departed well before this film had been made, but he is in the film in various archival interviews. And of course, I watched this with a great deal of affection since I interviewed Bill Gaines 3 times. And he was absolutely everything I wanted the publisher of Mad to be. Uh, you walked into his office at Madison Avenue, and he had a letter slot, the little letter slot,
yeah.
and it says Plastic Man's entrance. And then you go into his office, and he had I think Sergio Argonones made this. It is a plaster of no, a paper mache head of King Kong mounted in the window, looking as if Kong is climbing up, peering into the window.
He was huge on Kong, and I remember Zeppelins in his office.
Yes, there were a couple
The
of
Ridgeables. Yeah.
beautiful toy Zeppelins, metal toy Zeppelins from the 30s hanging on the ceiling. There was a real perverse thing in his office, which was a portrait of a picture of Roscoe Fatty Arbuckle and the woman who was supposedly he raped to
Virginia
death.
Rap?
Right. In one
Yeah.
of those frames, hinged frames, like you would put,
Oh my
me and
God.
Mary or you and Marge in. Um, which was a low blow because, as we all know, Arbuckle was accused of a crime that he did not admit, but it did not commit. So anyway, it was very nostalgic for me to see this. Um, and they interviewed Nick Meglin a lot in it, who was a very influential editor at Mad. And on my second visit to Bill Gaines, I had written a Mad script, and I told Gaines that, and he called Meglin in like that. And he says, this young man has written a script. Meglin said, let's see it. So I went to Meglin's office, and it was the worst 5 minutes of my life
Oh God.
because he didn't smile at all. And I'm thinking, oh, I should never have done this. And he looks at me, he says, that was really funny. That was really well written, but you have a problem. I said, what was
Uh-oh.
the problem? You wrote in the style of another mad writer, and I did. Because Writer's Digest magazine had taught me that you were to write a query or a proposal
Oh.
in the style of the magazine. And Maitland
you
was very nice.
obeyed.
He
You
was a very
obeyed.
nice guy, just like Gaines. He was very patient with me. He explained it. Unfortunately, I never came up with something else that I could really pitch to them because I would have I would have been beyond happy to have
I
been
my,
published in Mad.
my experience with Mad was I went to the offices once, and I went as a young freelancer when I was trying to get work. So this would have been 1978, probably. Yeah,
Okay.
1978. So I either was about to graduate or had just graduated from the Joe Kubert School of Cartoon and Graphic Art. And I went up to Mad after the worst job interview of my life as a freelancer at DC Comics. And luckily, I had made an appointment with Jerry DeFuscio.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And Jerry was not only kind with me, he could tell that something was wrong. And he closed the door and he said, "Are you okay?" And I said, "I just had the worst freelance interview of my life." And, I'd only been going to interviews for like a year, a year and a half. And he said, "What happened?" And I told him I had been interviewed by Joe Orlando up the DC office. And I won't go into it, but it was terrible.
And Orlando, by the way, came from Mad.
Yeah, well,
He
that's
was
what.
a Mad artist at
So
one point.
Jerry went, "Let me tell you about Joe Orlando," and he like talked me down. He like got me down off the precipice, and I'll be forever thankful to him for that. And he said, "Well, let's look at your folio," and he took a look at my folio, and I had some mix of drawings I'd done in class and my first couple of pro jobs, and he liked my work, but he said, "You're not a mad artist." He says, "You should keep at it. You're a good cartoonist. You're going to find work. Don't let what happened at DC stop you. Keep going." But you're not working in any style that Mad publishes. But let me give you a tour of the office. Like, he was determined to make my visit not only worthwhile, but he wanted to raise my spirits before I left. So I got to tour the Mad offices by Jerry DeFuscio, and Gaines was not in, but Jerry opened the door, and that's when I saw the Zeppelins
Yeah.
and the Kong and all that. So I got to tour the Mad offices. I later had friends who had work in the later iterations of Mad, and that's really cool. But including Noah von Sciver, who sold some work to Mad before the magazine folded. But I'm very much in Mad's debt as a reader. I mean, I grew up reading Mad, and very much in Jerry DeFuscio's debt because
So
of what he did for me that day.
you need to see this. Everyone needs to see this, especially
Yeah,
if you grew
yeah.
up reading Mad. So
Thanks,
our time is
everyone.
up.
Yeah, yeah. And I didn't even talk about the Polonio brothers, if you want to talk about bad dinosaur movies, but I love the Polonia brothers' work, and it's in the book. Just pick
Okay.
up Paleo Pop.
So first of all, folks, buy this book. Buy it as a Christmas present to yourself, a holiday present. The second thing is this is going to be the first Cine-Geezers that is going to have a separate special posting of some hand-picked trailers of some of the films that we talked about.
Yeah.
So when we post this, there will be an additional post of these trailers that you can lovingly enjoy. And I hope that some of you will be motivated to watch some of the good dino movies that we mentioned,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
or explore at your own risk some of the bad ones that we've mentioned.
Thanks so much, Mike.
Thanks so much, Steve.
And thank you so much out there, fellow Cine-Geezers and Cine-Geezettes. We will be back. I'm hoping we're going to be talking to a younger potential future Cine-Geezer who's obsessed with Universal monster movies, from
I'm
what
going to
you've
try to
mentioned to
make
me.
that happen.
And
Uh,
you've also got some other guests lined up. We won't name them because we don't want to make promises we can't
we don't
keep.
want to
But
jinx it, but yeah,
no, we don't want to
we've got
jinx
some
it.
good guests
So,
that we're lining up, so I think people will be impressed by them.
okay.
Thanks very much, folks.
Thanks, everybody. Take care.